The neon sign outside still worked. That was the strangest thing Martin Webb noticed as he stood in the wreckage of his bar at 3 in the morning, blood drying on his knuckles, broken glass crunching under his shoes with every small movement. The Hideaway. Blue and pink letters, flickering slightly the way they always did, casting shadows across the destruction inside. Tables overturned, chairs splintered, the mirror behind the bar shattered into 1,000 fragments that caught the neon light and threw it back in fractured pieces. His life, reflected. He held a crumpled envelope in his left hand, the one that wasn't swollen and purple. 50,000 bait inside, not the money they'd asked for originally, something else, something worse. He couldn't remember exactly when he picked it up off the floor, only that it was there now, and he was holding it, and nothing made sense anymore except the simple, devastating knowledge that he'd been wrong about everything. 3 months earlier, Martin had stepped off the plane at Suvarnabhumi Airport with 2 suitcases and a feeling he hadn't experienced in over a decade. Hope, real hope, the kind that makes your chest feel light and your steps quick even after a 9-hour flight. He was 50 years old, divorced, free. And finally, after 25 years of fluorescent-lit conference rooms and spreadsheets and performance reviews and the slow, grinding erosion of whatever person he used to be, he was going to build something that mattered, something his. The Sydney autumn had been cold when he left, but Bangkok was humid and warm, and he'd stood outside the terminal for a moment just breathing it in. This was it, the reset button, the second act. His marriage had ended badly. Not explosively, just sadly, the way most long marriages end when neither person can remember why they started. Sarah had gotten the house in Mosman, half his super, and full custody of their indifference toward each other. The settlement had gutted him financially but liberated him in ways he hadn't expected. For the first time since his 20s, Martin had asked himself what he actually wanted. The answer had been immediate and clear. Out of banking, out of Sydney, out of the life that had somehow happened to him while he was busy making it happen. He'd been visiting Pattaya for years, first on business trips, then on holidays, then on something that felt more like research. Everyone said it was seedy, and parts of it were, but Martin had always seen something else. Energy, possibility. A place where Western money could still build something real. He'd spent countless evenings sitting in beachfront bars, drinking Chang beer, watching the sunset paint the Gulf of Thailand in orange and gold, imagining what it would feel like to own one of these places. Not the big clubs on Walking Street with their aggressive touts and choreographed shows. Something smaller, authentic. A neighborhood spot where locals and expats mixed, where the music wasn't too loud, where people came back not because of the girls but because of the atmosphere. The Hideaway had seemed perfect from the first viewing. Soi 8, just off Second Road, close enough to the action but far enough to have its own character. The previous owner was a British man in his 60s who wanted to retire back to Manchester before his liver gave out entirely. The bar itself was small, maybe 60 square meters, with an open front that let in the street breeze, a decent sound system, and a loyal crowd of regulars who showed up most nights. The numbers worked. Monthly rent was manageable. The existing staff knew what they were doing. The location had foot traffic without the chaos. Martin had done his research. He'd read the expat forums. He'd talked to other bar owners. He understood the basics of work permits and visas and Thai business law. He knew about the nominee shareholder structure, the need for a good lawyer, the importance of keeping books clean for tax purposes. What he hadn't understood, really understood, was that none of that mattered as much as relationships he didn't know he needed. He paid 480,000 Australian dollars for the lease, the existing setup, and the goodwill. His entire divorce settlement transferred in 3 separate wire payments over 2 weeks. The morning he signed the papers, he'd felt like crying from pure relief. His lawyer, a Thai woman named Miss Ploy who came recommended by an expat business group, had guided him through every document, explained every clause. Everything was legal. Everything was proper. Martin Webb was now the majority owner of a bar in Pattaya, Thailand. He'd called his daughter that night, hoping she might be happy for him, but she'd just sighed and said, "Dad, really?" in that tone that suggested she'd given up expecting him to make sensible choices. Maybe she'd been right. The first week of ownership was a blur of minor chaos and major optimism. Martin kept the name, kept the staff, kept most of the menu and drink prices. He repainted the exterior, upgraded the toilet, bought new glassware, and invested in a better coffee machine because he wanted the Hideaway to work as a daytime cafe too, not just a nighttime bar. He introduced a happy hour. He created a social media page. He smiled until his face hurt and learned the names of every regular customer Kun Somchai, Mr. John Pai Nok. He practiced his Thai badly, and people laughed with him, and it felt right. Better than expected, actually. Weeknight crowds were steady. Weekends were packed. The location delivered exactly what he'd hoped for, a mix of Thai regulars from the neighborhood, expat retirees, and the occasional tourist who'd wandered off the main strips looking for something less manufactured. Revenue in week 1 exceeded his projections by 15%. Week 2 was even better. Martin found himself thinking, in quiet moments, that maybe he'd actually done it. Maybe this was the life he was supposed to have been living all along. Somchai came on a Wednesday afternoon, 2 weeks and 3 days after Martin took ownership. It was the slow period, just after lunch, when the bar was mostly empty except for 2 old German guys nursing beers in the corner, and Martin's head bartender, a young Thai man named Tong, restocking bottles behind the counter. Martin was at his usual table near the open front, laptop open, going through supplier invoices. He didn't notice the man until he was standing right there, backlit by the afternoon sun streaming in from the street. "Mr. Martin?" The voice was pleasant, educated. The English was perfect, almost accentless. Martin looked up and saw a Thai man in his early 40s, maybe late 30s, dressed in pressed slacks and a polo shirt that looked expensive. Clean-shaven. Gold watch. The kind of casual presentation that suggested money without flaunting it. He was smiling. "That's me," Martin said, closing his laptop and standing up, extending his hand. "Can I help you?" "I hope so." The handshake was firm but not aggressive. "My name is Somchai. I work with the Neighborhood Business Association. I wanted to welcome you properly and make sure you're settling in well." "That's very kind of you. Please sit." Martin gestured to the opposite chair, and Somchai sat with the easy comfort of someone who did this often. Martin called over to Tong for 2 bottles of water, then turned his attention back to his visitor. "Business Association? I don't think I've heard about that." "It's informal," Somchai said, accepting the water bottle when Tong brought it over. "Just a group of local business owners who work together to maintain good relationships in the area. We help each other out. You know how it is." Martin didn't know, but he nodded anyway. "That sounds useful." "It can be." Somchai opened his water bottle and took a small sip. "Pattaya is a wonderful place to do business, but it can be complicated for newcomers. Lots of regulations, lots of people to keep happy. I like to make sure new owners understand how things work here. It saves problems later." "I appreciate that," Martin said. "I did a fair bit of research before I bought the place, but I'm sure there's plenty I don't know yet. Any advice is welcome." Somchai smiled again. It was a practiced smile, Martin noticed, the kind that didn't quite reach the eyes. "You've done well so far. The Hideaway has a good reputation. The previous owner, Mr. Phillip, he understood the neighborhood. People liked him. That goodwill transfers to you, but only if you maintain the same relationships. That's the plan," Martin said. "Keep what works, improve what doesn't. Smart." Somchai nodded slowly, as if considering something. Then he leaned back in his chair and the smile widened just slightly. "There's one thing Mr. Phillip handled that you should know about. A small monthly contribution. 15,000 baht. It goes toward maintaining good relationships with local authorities, ensuring smooth operations, handling small issues before they become big problems. Most of the bars and restaurants in this area participate. It's very standard." Martin felt something shift in his chest. Not alarm exactly, more like recognition. He'd heard about this kind of thing on the forums. T-money protection payments. The informal systems that operated beneath the official ones. He'd always assumed it was exaggerated or outdated or only applied to certain businesses. "I see," he said carefully. "And what exactly does this contribution cover?" "Peace of mind," Somchai said simply. "Quick permit approvals when you need them. Friendly relationships with police and district office. No problems with noise complaints or health inspections or neighbor issues. These things can shut down a business very quickly, if not managed properly. The contribution ensures they're managed properly." "Right." Martin took a drink of his water, buying himself a moment to think. This was the moment. He could feel it. Say yes, pay the money, continue on smoothly, or push back. "I appreciate you explaining this, but I have to be honest, I'm not comfortable with unofficial payments. I've got my permits. I'm legal. I pay my taxes. If there are legitimate fees for the neighborhood association, I'm happy to discuss that through proper channels. But, of course. Somchai held up a hand, still smiling. "I understand completely. You're a businessman. You want everything official and transparent. That's very Western, very proper." The way he said proper made it sound almost like an insult, though his tone remained friendly. The thing is, Mr. Martin, Thailand operates differently. We have official systems, yes, but we also have unofficial systems that actually make things work. You can fight the unofficial systems if you want. Many Farangs do when they first arrive, but it makes life very difficult. I'm not looking to fight anyone, Martin said, and he meant it. I just want to run my bar and treat people fairly. Then we want the same thing. Somchai reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it on the table between them. Plain white card, name, phone number, no company name. Think about it. Talk to other owners if you want. You'll find that most people choose the easier path. 15,000 baht is not so much for peace of mind. Small price for no problems. I'll think about it, Martin said, though he'd already decided he wouldn't pay. Somchai stood up, leaving his water bottle half-finished on the table. Good. I'll check back with you in a week or so. Enjoy your success, Mr. Martin. The Hideaway is a good bar. I'd hate to see anything go wrong. He said it pleasantly, like a genuine wish, but Martin heard the undertone. The implication. After Somchai left, Martin sat at his table for a long time, staring at the business card. Tong came over eventually, wiping down the table, and noticed the card. He picked it up, glanced at it, and his expression changed. Just slightly. You know this man? Tong asked. He just introduced himself, Martin said. Said something about neighborhood contributions. Tong set the card back down carefully, as if it might burn him. Mr. Philip always pay, he said quietly. Every month, never late. Did he tell you why? Tong looked uncomfortable. It's better to pay, he said finally. Then he walked back to the bar without another word. That night, Martin convinced himself that Somchai was running some kind of scam that only worked on naive newcomers. He told himself that paying would set a precedent, that he'd be funding corruption, that this was exactly the kind of thing he'd left corporate politics to escape. He told himself that if everyone just stood up to these informal taxes, the system would collapse. He told himself a lot of things. Sitting in his bar as the evening crowd filtered in, and the music played, and the cash register rang, and everything felt exactly like the dream he'd spent years building in his mind. He told himself he was right. He didn't know yet how expensive being right was going to be. The first month after Somchai's visit was the best month Martin had ever had in business. Revenue exceeded projections by 22%. Reviews on TripAdvisor and Google went from good to excellent. A travel blogger with a modest following stopped by and wrote a piece calling The Hideaway, the kind of authentic local spot that makes Pattaya worth visiting beyond the obvious attractions. Martin printed it out and hung it behind the bar. He felt vindicated. Somchai hadn't come back. The sky hadn't fallen. Business was thriving. Every night when he closed up and counted the till, Martin allowed himself a moment of satisfaction that felt almost spiritual. This was what autonomy felt like. This was what integrity looked like. He'd stood his ground, and nothing bad had happened. The first sign came in week 5. His regular liquor supplier, a company called Thai Beverage Distribution that had been reliable and prompt since day one, missed a delivery. Martin called. They apologized. System error, stock issue. It would be sorted by the following day. It wasn't. The next delivery came 3 days late, and when it arrived, 2 cases of Johnny Walker Red were missing from the order. Martin called again. More apologies. They'd credit his account. Meanwhile, he'd had to send Tong to a more expensive retail supplier to keep the shelves stocked, eating into his margins. Annoying, but these things happened. Then the health inspector came. A Tuesday morning, unannounced, which Martin understood was normal. The inspector was thorough. Excessively thorough. He spent 40 minutes examining the kitchen, which was barely a kitchen, just a small prep area where they assembled simple bar snacks. He found violations. The refrigerator temperature was 0.5 degrees too warm. There was a crack in one of the floor tiles that could harbor bacteria. The hand-washing sink drainage was insufficient. He wrote everything down in careful Thai script while Martin stood there trying to follow along with his limited vocabulary. The inspector left him with an official notice. 15,000 baht in fines, 2 weeks to correct the violations or face closure. Martin stared at the number. 15,000 baht. Exactly the monthly contribution Somchai had requested. The coincidence felt deliberate. He wanted to call it out, to demand to know if this was real or theater. But the inspector's face showed nothing but bureaucratic indifference. Martin paid a contractor 8,000 baht to fix the violations and submitted the documentation. The fines were waived, but the message had been delivered. Week 6 brought the noise complaints, 3 of them in 5 days, all called in to the police between 10 and 11 at night, all claiming the hideaway was disturbing the neighborhood with excessive volume. This was absurd. Martin kept the music at reasonable levels, specifically to avoid this issue. The bar 2 doors down played Thai pop at volumes that made conversation impossible, and the karaoke place across the street was a nightly assault on human hearing. But it was Martin's bar the police visited. Different officers each time, always polite, always apologetic, always with the same message. We received a complaint. You need to keep the volume down. After the third visit, one of the older cops, a sergeant with gray hair and tired eyes, pulled Martin aside. "You should talk to Kun Songchai," he said quietly. "He can help with these complaints." "I don't need that kind of help," Martin said. The sergeant shrugged. "Up to you." He walked away, and Martin felt a flush of anger that surprised him with its intensity. This was extortion. Obvious, clumsy extortion. And yet everyone seemed to accept it as normal. Expected him to accept it. The realization made him furious and more determined than ever not to pay. He reached out to other expat bar owners, started with the ones he'd met casually, graduated to joining a line group for Pattaya business owners. Most were evasive when he brought up protection money. One American who owned a sports bar on Soibuacal messaged him privately. "Just pay it, man. It's not worth the headache. Think of it as insurance." Martin responded that he didn't negotiate with extortionists. The American didn't reply. Derek was the only one who gave him a straight answer. Derek was Australian, late 50s, had owned a bar on Soi 7 for 8 years. They'd met at an expat networking event Martin had attended in his second week. Derek had seemed like someone who'd made it work, who understood both cultures, who'd achieved the dream. Martin invited him for a beer one afternoon when the hideaway was quiet. He laid out everything that had been happening. Derek listened without interrupting, his expression growing more concerned with each detail. "Mate," Derek said when Martin finished, "you need to pay." "That's not the advice I was hoping for. It's the advice you need." Derek leaned forward, his voice low. "I know how this sounds. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is everything you left Australia to get away from. Corruption, people with their hands out. But this isn't Sydney. The rules are different here. The systems are different. Somchai isn't some random shakedown artist. He works for the Chaiwat family. You know who they are?" Martin shook his head. "They own half the properties on Second Road. They've got connections to the provincial government, the police, the district office. They've been here for 3 generations. When Somchai comes collecting, it's not optional. It never was. Philip paid. Every single bar owner on this swap pays. You're not taking a stand against corruption. You're just making yourself a problem that needs to be solved. So I should just give in, just accept being ripped off. 15,000 baht a month isn't being ripped off. It's the cost of doing business. You pay it, everything runs smooth. You don't pay it, and what you're experiencing now is just the beginning. It gets worse, mate. Much worse. How much worse?" Derek looked uncomfortable. "I've seen them shut down 3 bars in the years I've been here. 2 Farangs who thought they could fight it. 1 Thai guy who got on the wrong side of the family. They don't mess around. Vandalism. Staff intimidation. Escalating problems until you're forced to sell at a loss or just walk away. You think you're standing on principle. They think you're disrespecting their authority. There's no winning that fight." Martin felt something cold settle in his stomach. So everyone just pays. Nobody stands up. Everyone who wants to stay in business pays. It's not right. It's not fair. But it's real. Derek finished his beer and stood up. "Look, I like you. I think you're genuine. But you need to understand what you're up against. This isn't about justice. It's about survival. Pay the money. Run your bar. Have a good life. That's the deal." After Derek left, Martin sat alone nursing his own beer and watching the street outside. Motorcycles and tuk-tuks and tourists walking past with shopping bags and sunburns. Normal life. The Thailand he'd fallen in love with. Except underneath it all was this other system. This shadow structure that Derek accepted and Somchai enforced and Martin was supposed to just swallow. He couldn't do it, not because he was brave, but because something in him had calcified over the years of corporate compromise. He'd spent 25 years saying yes to things he didn't believe in, following rules that made no sense, playing politics he despised. This bar was supposed to be different. This life was supposed to mean something. He wasn't going to pay. Noi noticed the change in him before anyone else. They'd been seeing each other for about 6 weeks, since just before he bought the bar. She was 28, worked as a waitress at an upscale Thai restaurant 3 blocks away, spoke excellent English, and had the kind of practical intelligence that came from growing up poor in Isan and working her way to Pattaya on her own terms. Martin liked that she didn't need him financially, liked that their relationship felt balanced, adult, free of the transactional dynamics he'd seen in so many Farang Thai relationships. She'd been excited about the bar, had helped him choose new paint colors, had introduced him to her friends, but lately she'd been distant, quiet. She came over less often. When she did, she watched him with an expression he couldn't quite read. One night in week 7, after a particularly frustrating day that included another late liquor delivery and a visit from the city electrical inspector who found code violations that hadn't existed a month ago, Martin complained to her about all of it. She listened in silence, sitting on the edge of his bed in the small apartment he rented above a laundry service. "You should pay Chai," she said finally. Martin felt a spike of irritation. "Not you too." "I'm serious, Martin. This is not a game. These people are dangerous. They're bullies. If everyone stopped paying, they'd have no power. But everyone won't stop paying, only you, and they will destroy you." She said it matter-of-factly, without drama, which somehow made it worse. "I can't just give in. Don't you understand? If I pay, I'm part of the problem. I'm funding their operation. I'm teaching them they can extort anyone. You're not teaching them anything. They already know they can do this. They've been doing this for years. You're not a hero for refusing. You're just being stubborn. So you think I'm stupid. I think you don't understand Thailand." Her voice was gentle but firm. "You think because you have money and education and Western ideas about justice that you can change things. But you can't. You're one person, one foreigner. You have no power here, and the more you fight, the more danger you're in." "Danger," Martin repeated. "You really think they'd hurt me?" Noi looked at him for a long moment. "My cousin owned a shop in Bangkok. He refused to pay his protection fee. They burned his shop down. He lost everything. He's lucky they didn't hurt his family." She stood up, collecting her purse. "I care about you, Martin, but I can't watch you destroy yourself because you're too proud to see reality. Pay the money or sell the bar. Those are your only choices." She left. She didn't slam the door. She just left. And Martin sat there in the empty apartment, angry and scared and more alone than he'd felt since the divorce. Somchai came back in week 8, same friendly smile, same expensive casual clothes, but the energy was different, sharper. He sat down at Martin's table without being invited, and this time he didn't order water. "Mr. Martin," he said, "I think we need to talk." "I think we don't," Martin replied, keeping his voice steady. "I've been very patient, very respectful. I gave you time to understand how things work, time to talk to other owners, time to see that everyone participates, but you continue to refuse. I continue to run a legitimate business and pay my legitimate fees. If you have a problem with that, I suggest you take it up with the authorities." Somchai's smile didn't change, but something in his eyes did. "The authorities are not your friends here, Mr. Martin. The authorities answer to people who answer to people who answer to my employers. You think you're protected by laws and permits. You're not. You're only protected by goodwill, and your goodwill is running out. Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." Somchai stood up, smooth and unhurried. "I'll give you until the end of this month. 15,000 baht delivered to this bar, to me, in cash. If you pay, all your problems stop immediately. Deliveries return to normal. Inspectors stop visiting. Complaints disappear. Life gets easy again. If you don't pay, life gets very difficult. I can't be more clear than that." "I understand perfectly," Martin said, "and my answer is still no." Somchai looked at him with something almost like pity. "You Farangs, always so sure you know better, always so certain your way is the right way. It would be admirable if it wasn't so foolish." He walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "My employers don't like problems, Mr. Martin, and you're becoming a problem. Think very carefully about whether your pride is worth what comes next." He left. The bar felt colder after he was gone, even though the afternoon heat was suffocating. Tong, who'd been pretending not to listen from behind the bar, came over and started wiping down tables that didn't need wiping. "Boss," he said quietly, "please, you should pay." Martin looked at his bartender, this young man who'd been nothing but loyal, who'd taught him Thai phrases and covered shifts when he was sick and laughed at his terrible jokes. "I can't, Tong. I'm sorry, but I can't." Tong nodded slowly, sadly, and went back to wiping tables. That night, Martin lay awake calculating. He had 3 weeks until Somchai's deadline. 3 weeks to figure out a solution that didn't involve surrender. He could hire security, he could install cameras, he could document everything and build a case. He could reach out to the embassy again, push harder this time. He could find a better lawyer, one with real connections. He could go to the English language newspapers, expose the whole system. Surely someone cared about this. Surely there was a path forward that didn't require him to become complicit in his own exploitation. He ran through scenarios until dawn started bleeding through his curtains, and in all of them he saw himself winning, standing tall, proving that integrity mattered, that one person could make a difference. He didn't see what was actually coming, didn't understand that he'd already lost, didn't realize that the fight he thought he was having and the fight that was actually happening were two completely different things. In Martin's mind, this was about principle. In Somchai's mind, and in the minds of the people Somchai worked for, this was about power. And power didn't negotiate with pride. It crushed it. 3 days before the end of the month, Martin arrived at the hideaway at 9 in the morning to find the front gate pulled halfway down and the lock broken. Not picked. Broken. The metal was twisted, bent outward like someone had used a crowbar or pipe. His first thought, stupidly, was that he'd forgotten to secure it properly the night before. But he remembered locking up. He always remembered. He'd checked it twice because lately he'd been checking everything twice, triple-checking the things that mattered, operating in a state of low-grade anxiety that had become so constant he barely noticed it anymore. He lifted the gate fully and stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Alcohol. Strong and sharp and everywhere. Then his eyes adjusted to the dim interior and he saw what they'd done. Every bottle behind the bar had been smashed. Not knocked over. Smashed. Systematically. The shelf units were intact, but the glass was destroyed. Liquor pooled across the bar top and dripping onto the floor in steady streams that caught the morning light coming through the open front. Whiskey and vodka and rum and gin mixing into a toxic puddle that would take days to clean and thousands of dollars to replace. The tables were overturned, chairs broken, their legs snapped off and scattered. The mirror behind the bar, the big one he'd installed himself in week 2, was shattered into a spiderweb of cracks that somehow held together while reflecting nothing but fragmentation. Martin stood there breathing shallowly, his heart doing something irregular in his chest. This wasn't robbery. The register was closed but untouched. The small safe he kept in the back office, he found it later, was still locked and full of last week's cash receipts. They hadn't taken anything. This was a message. This was punishment. This was the answer to his refusal delivered in broken glass and wasted inventory. He called the police. They came. 2 officers in brown uniforms who walked through the destruction with expressions that suggested they'd seen this before and knew exactly what it meant. Martin tried to explain, tried to make them understand this was targeted, criminal, organized. They took notes. They took photos. They gave him a case number. One of them, the younger one who spoke decent English, looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. "You have insurance?" he asked. "Son," Martin said. "But that's not the point. Someone did this deliberately. I need you to investigate. I need you to find out who." "We will investigate," the officer said, in the tone of someone who had no intention of investigating. "You should talk to your neighbors. Maybe they saw something." After they left, Martin called his insurance company. The claims process would take weeks. The coverage wouldn't be enough. He called his liquor supplier to reorder stock. They said they'd get back to him on availability. He called a cleaning service. They quoted him 8,000 baht and said they could come tomorrow. He called Derek. Derek said he'd come by later, but his voice sounded grim. Then Martin sat on one of the few unbroken chairs and tried to think clearly through the rage and fear that were fighting for dominance in his head. This was meant to break him. Make him pay, make him sell, make him leave. And every rational part of his brain said that's exactly what he should do. Cut his losses. Accept defeat. Go home to Sydney with whatever he could salvage. But another part, the part that had driven him through 25 years of corporate warfare and a soul-crushing divorce, the part that had convinced him he could build something meaningful in a foreign country at 50 years old, that part refused to bend. They'd destroyed his bar but left the structure intact. They'd sent a message but stopped short of burning it down, which meant they still wanted him to pay, which meant he still had leverage, which meant if he reopened, if he showed he wouldn't be intimidated, maybe they'd realize he was serious and back off. It was the stupidest thought he'd ever had. He just didn't know it yet. He spent 2 days cleaning. Tong didn't come back, didn't call, just vanished. Martin couldn't blame him. The other staff members made excuses. Family emergencies. Other jobs. One waitress was honest enough to say she was scared and couldn't work there anymore. Martin cleaned alone, sweeping glass, mopping liquor, righting furniture, patching what could be patched. Derek came by on the 2nd day, took one look at Martin scrubbing the floor, and shook his head. "You're reopening," Derek said. It wasn't a question. "Tomorrow night," Martin confirmed. "Mate, this is insane. They destroyed your bar. They'll do worse if you don't pay." Or they'll realize, I'm not going anywhere and leave me alone. That's not how this works. Derek pulled up a chair, one of the broken ones, sat on it carefully. I talked to some people, asked around quietly. You need to understand what's happening here. This wasn't random violence. This was calibrated. They broke your stuff but didn't touch your money. They scared off your staff but didn't hurt anyone. This is step 2 in a very predictable process. Step 3 is you personally, and trust me, you don't want to get to step 3. So I should just pay now. After they did this, that's rewarding them for vandalism. That's surviving. That's understanding you're not in a position to teach anyone lessons. Derek's voice was getting heated, frustrated. You keep thinking this is about right and wrong. It's not. It's about power. They have it. You don't. That's the entire equation. I have rights. I have a legal business. You have nothing. Derek stood up, his face flushed. You have a leasehold that can be revoked. You have permits that can be denied. You have a visa that can be canceled. You have a body that can be broken. That's what you actually have. Everything else is fantasy. Wake up, Martin, please, before they make you. Derek left. Martin finished cleaning. That evening he stood in his bar, surveying the damage he'd managed to minimize but couldn't erase. The mirror was still cracked. Half the chairs were still broken. The shelves behind the bar looked empty and sad with their depleted inventory. But it was functional. Operational. He could open tomorrow. He would open tomorrow. He'd sent a message on the bar's Facebook page, reopening Friday night. Same great atmosphere, new determination. Come support local business. 3 people had liked it. Noy hadn't called in 5 days. He'd tried reaching her twice. She hadn't responded. The silence felt like another loss in a growing collection. Friday night, Martin opened at 6. No staff. Just him. He bought enough stock to cover basic drinks, turned on the music, turned on the lights, opened the front gate. 2 regulars came, stayed for 1 drink, left quickly. A tourist couple wandered in, ordered cocktails Martin made badly, didn't tip. By 9 o'clock, he'd served maybe 15 drinks total. By 10, the bar was empty except for Martin, standing behind his cracked mirror, watching the street outside, waiting for customers who weren't coming, and trouble that was. They arrived at 10:30, 4 of them. Thai men in their 20s, maybe early 30s. Fit, wearing jeans and dark t-shirts. They didn't look like customers, and they moved like people who'd done this before. Martin's stomach dropped, but he stayed behind the bar, kept his voice steady. We're closing soon, he said. But I can get you a quick drink if we're not here for drinks, one of them said. His English was minimal but sufficient. The 4 of them spread out, blocking the exit, moving with coordinated efficiency, not some chai's polished authority. This was something else, something worse. Younger violence, hired violence. You need to leave, Martin said, and heard his voice crack slightly. They didn't leave. They came toward him. Martin thought about running, thought about the back door, thought about fighting, thought about screaming, but his body had locked up with the specific terror of knowing what was about to happen and being powerless to stop it. One of them grabbed him, yanked him over the bar. He hit the floor hard, rolled, tried to get up. Someone kicked him in the ribs. Not full force, controlled, professional. He went down again. They pulled him up, slammed him against the wall. The beating was methodical. They didn't shout or get emotional. They worked quietly, precisely, like mechanics disassembling something. Ribs, stomach, face. They held his left hand flat against the bar and one of them brought something heavy down on it. Martin heard the crack before he felt the pain, and then the pain arrived and he screamed. The sound that came out of him was animal, unrecognizable. They let him fall. He curled up on the floor, trying to protect what was already broken, tasting blood, unable to catch his breath through the fire in his chest. One of them crouched down next to him, dropped something on his chest, an envelope. White, thick, 50,000, the man said slowly, making sure Martin understood. For time wasted, for disrespect, you pay everything now. 15 from before. 50 for this. You have 3 days. Understand? Martin couldn't speak, could barely breathe. He nodded, or thought he nodded. The man stood up. They left. Just walked out into the Pattaya night like they'd finished a job, which they had. Martin lay on the floor of his bar, the envelope on his chest, blood in his mouth, his hands screaming, his ribs screaming, everything screaming. The neon sign outside still flickered, blue and pink. The hideaway. His dream, reflected in broken glass. He didn't remember calling for help. Someone must have. A Thai woman from the shop next door, maybe, drawn by the screaming. The ambulance came. Bangkok Hospital, Pattaya. Emergency room, X-rays. 3 broken ribs. Left hand shattered, 2 metacarpals fractured, would need pins. Facial contusions. They admitted him overnight for observation. The doctor, a tired-looking Thai man in his 50s, asked what happened. Martin said he fell. The doctor looked at him with an expression that said he knew that was a lie, but wouldn't push. "Be more careful," he said quietly. Martin woke up the next morning to find Noy sitting in a chair by his bed. For a moment he felt such relief he almost cried. Then he saw what she was holding. A piece of paper. Notebook paper, folded once. "I can't do this," she said. No preamble, no emotion, just fact. "I told you to pay. I told you this would happen. You didn't listen. And now look at you. Noe, please. I care about you, Martin. I did. But I can't watch you destroy yourself. I can't be part of this." She stood up, put the paper on the bedside table. "I wrote down what I wanted to say because if I talk, I'll get upset. Read it when you feel better. I'm sorry. I really am. But you did this to yourself." She left. The paper stayed. Martin didn't read it for 2 days. When he finally did, it was 3 sentences. "You came to Thailand thinking you could change things. But Thailand doesn't change for anyone. I hope you understand that before it's too late." It was already too late. Derek came that afternoon. Brought fruit. Sat heavily in the chair Noe had vacated. "I'm not going to say I told you so," he said. "Thanks, but I fucking told you so." Derek's voice cracked. "Jesus, mate. Look at you. Was it worth it? Was your pride worth this?" Martin didn't answer because he didn't have an answer. His lawyer, Miss Ploy, called the hospital that evening. Very apologetic, very professional. She was withdrawing from his case. Conflict of interest. She couldn't represent him anymore. She'd send him the contact information for another attorney. She never did. His bar license, he learned 3 days later from an official notice delivered to his hospital room, was under review for multiple code violations and permit irregularities. Operation suspended pending investigation. Expected resolution time, 3 to 6 months. The bank called about his business loan payment, past due. He'd missed it while lying in the hospital. They wanted immediate payment plus late fees or they'd begin default proceedings. His landlord called. Said there had been complaints about the property damage, about noise, about disturbances. He was considering terminating the lease. Martin tried to explain it wasn't his fault, tried to describe what had happened, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Fault didn't matter. Results mattered. And the result was his bar was shut down, his body was broken, and his savings were evaporating. Derek came back a week later, after Martin had been discharged, helped him up the stairs to his apartment because the ribs made it agony, sat him down, made tea he didn't drink. "I need to tell you something," Derek said, "and you're not going to like it. Can't be worse than what's already happened. Your bar is being sold." Martin stared at him. "What?" "I didn't agree to sell anything. You don't have a choice, mate. The family that owns the building, they're claiming you owe money for damages, for lost revenue from other tenants who left because of the disturbances, for repair costs, for legal fees. They're saying it's $60,000 total. And since you can't operate and can't pay, they're exercising their right to seize the business assets and put them up for sale to recover costs. That's not legal. That's theft. I'll fight it. You'll lose." Derek's voice was gentle but absolute. "The judges here, the courts, they're not going to rule against the Chaiwa family. You're a foreigner who refused to play by the rules everyone else follows. You made yourself a problem. And problems get solved. This is how they solve it. They take everything, sell it to someone who will pay, and you walk away with nothing. It's already done, Martin. The paperwork went through yesterday." Martin felt something break inside him that had nothing to do with his ribs. "Everything? My entire investment? The $480,000 I put in? Gone. You might get a small settlement if you push, maybe 20 or 30,000 baht just to make you go away quietly. But the bar, the lease, the goodwill, the setup, all of it belongs to them now. I'm sorry, mate. I'm so fucking sorry." 6 weeks later, Martin boarded a flight back to Sydney. His hand was in a cast. His ribs had healed enough to travel but still ached when he breathed deeply. He'd settled for 25,000 baht, roughly 1,000 Australian dollars, as his final payout. Everything else was gone. The hideaway had reopened under new management 3 days before he left. He walked past it once, saw the same neon sign, saw people inside drinking and laughing, saw a young Thai woman he didn't recognize working behind the bar. Life continued. The machine moved forward. His absence changed nothing. He moved back in with his brother temporarily. Got a job at a regional bank doing loan assessments, work he could do with one functional hand while the other healed. His daughter called once, said she was sorry things didn't work out. Martin thanked her and hung up before the conversation could go anywhere deeper. No, I sent him one message, 2 months after he returned. I hope you're okay. I hope you found peace. He didn't respond. Peace seemed like a foreign concept. 4 months after returning to Australia, scrolling through Facebook on a Sunday morning in his brother's spare room, Martin saw a post in one of the Pattaya expat groups. A young British guy, maybe 30, posting photos of a bar on Soi 12. Just bought my dream bar in Thailand. Can't wait to start this new chapter. Any advice from experienced owners welcome. The comments were congratulatory, enthusiastic, full of the same naive optimism Martin remembered feeling. He clicked on the guy's profile. Recent arrival, no history in Thailand. Just another dreamer with money and hope. Martin started typing a reply. Told him everything, the protection money, the escalation, the beating, the loss. Warned him to pay whatever was asked, to understand the rules before pretending they didn't exist, to remember that integrity was expensive, and pride was a luxury foreigners couldn't afford in someone else's country. He wrote for 10 minutes, pouring everything he'd learned into a message that might save this stranger from Martin's own mistakes. Then he read it back, saw how desperate it sounded, how bitter, how much like the rantings of someone who'd failed and wanted company in his failure. The guy wouldn't listen anyway. Nobody listened. Derek had tried to tell him. Noy had tried. Every warning sign had been flashing, and Martin had ignored them all because he'd believed that being right mattered more than understanding reality. He highlighted the message, deleted it, closed Facebook. Outside his window, Sydney was gray and cold and familiar. Inside his chest, something that used to be hope had calcified into a kind of tired acceptance. He'd gambled everything on a dream that never accounted for the world as it actually was. And he'd lost. Not because he was weak. Not because he was stupid. But because he'd confused principles with power. And in that gap between what should be and what is, he'd been crushed. The neon sign in his memory still flickered, blue and pink, the hideaway. A place that existed now only in his regrets, serving drinks to people who'd never know his name, operating smoothly under rules he'd refused to follow. Some chai had been right from the beginning. Most owners find it's just easier this way. Not better, not moral, not just easier. And Martin, broken and half a world away from where he'd tried to build his second act, finally understood the difference between those things. Some lessons cost everything to learn, and even then, they're only lessons if you survive to remember them.